Hello, my little Luxxes. I am Charsie Luxxx, and this is another Luxxy Charms. And it's also ghost stories my father used to tell me. Today, I am your Undertaker host, or as you may also wish to call me, your Grim Reaper, to take you on this tale about the underworld and the next side of the universe. Gather round the campfire with me, or in other words, right here with my candle. I guess that can kind of count for today. Welcome if you are new here. Like I said, my name is Charsie Luxxx. I am a adult cosplayer, and as of right now, I am dressed in character for this very specific ghost story that my father used to tell me. This was one, I believe this was one that he probably would have heard from somewhere. I need to give a shout out to my friend John. He'd let me know on the last ghost story that I had told that he had heard that one before as well, which it would make sense because my dad would pick up stories from anywhere and everywhere. He used to say that he loved listening to those ghost stories that they would play on the radio, because my dad is back from the time when things were on the radio or the old televisions. But yeah, I did not realize that the Golden Arm was one of those that was originally somewhere in the universe. I'd always assumed that my dad had made up that story or had just heard it from his friends or not, but so kind of an interesting thing to find out. So thank you, John, for letting me know about that and sharing that link with me as well. But so this one I am calling The Undertaker. Travel with me as we go into the countryside of a very small village, that not very rich village, kind of a poor village. And this is also taking you back in time. This is a simpler time back in the 1920s. This story focuses on the small town's undertaker, or the mortician, the graveyard digger, as you would also want to call him. He was one of the ones where he had just moved into town. He was only about in his late 30s. Very homely man. He wasn't what you would consider to be like the most attractive man you would ever see, but he was a little heavier set. But of course, you know the fact that what his job was, since he was a mortician and everything, that it's not really one of those prized jobs, and he wasn't really the town catch or anything, but very, very poor man when he came to town. When he first moved into town to take over the job from the original mortician who had been there, but he had passed away and the town was looking for someone else, he had taken on the position to become the new grave digger. He got to move into the old mortician's house, but it was a very small house, a very simple home, maybe only a few bedrooms, except for the fact that, of course, in the back of the house was the area that would be the mortician area, where he would, you know, take care of the dead for embalming or getting them ready for their burials and for their funerals. So he lived this simple life in this town, and the town goers started to notice that over time he seemed to be doing better off for himself, but they weren't entirely sure how, because he just lived the same simple life that the original mortician in the town had done. That over time, not right away, it took some time, but all of a sudden he started building on to the house that he was in. So remember, this was the original house of the original Undertaker. All of a sudden, when he started building on additions to this house, and it was growing very slowly, but he always seemed to be busy building his house. So over time, as they noticed through the years, that all of a sudden his 2-bedroom house would become a 3-bedroom house, or he would add on more elaborate things as time would go along, that he would build a gazebo out in the middle of his garden, or he would do a extended wraparound porch, and that as the house would continue to build over time, people kept wondering, well, gee, what is he doing that is so different from the other mortician, because he's not charging anyone any different than what he was doing before. In fact, his pricings were very good and well off, and that they were affordable, and that even with some of the higher end coffins, he was still charging a decent lower price than other places and other towns were doing. So people were very impressed with this guy, and they liked him a lot. So they weren't really questioning the fact, because they really liked this guy. He was a very friendly man. He was very open with everyone and very friendly. Well, he loved having house parties as well. So you would have people coming over to his house, and they would see how elaborate everything looked inside. He had nice furnishings and beautiful, beautiful decor in there, and the house just was stunning, and it was getting so much bigger than what it was before. This was when he first moved into town. Like I said, it was a very small house. It was only about a 2-bedroom house, but now all of a sudden this thing was becoming a mansion, and it was becoming a very elaborate mansion on top of that. So he would host these parties, and people would come over, and everybody loved him so much, and people would bring over foods, they would trade goods with him, and he just was a well-liked guy. So nobody questioned how he was able to afford to keep building on to this house. If funerals would happen, he was such a wonderful, friendly guy. He was very helpful, very sympathetic to everybody. And even people from outside of town started hearing rumors about how good of a mortician he was, just how wonderful and friendly he was, where people were coming from all over the place, coming just to have him be their mortician. And he didn't raise the prices of anything. He was still lower than everybody else. So all of a sudden business was booming. Well, now it started making more sense to people, where now, since he was pulling in more and more people, even from farther areas, miles away, people were coming in to have this specific guy because everybody just loved him so much. Nobody questioned where his 2-story mansion all of a sudden became a 3-story mansion. Well, now all of a sudden he became the town catch. So even though he was a very homely guy, he wasn't the most attractive man out there, and he was getting quite fat at this point in time as well, because he was very well fed. Women really wanted to be in his life, and they wanted to become his wife, and he got to have the pick of whoever he wanted to be with at that point in time. So he kind of started becoming a little bit of a playboy. So here we have this Undertaker who's hosting all these elaborate parties. He's this playboy. He's got all these different girlfriends. Well, he finally has taken a liking to some of the women and will bring them home with him at night. Well, some of these women started noticing that, he's always busy at work and he's always building onto the house. Well, one of the women in particular that was with him started noticing that the wood that he was using for his house was very small pieces of wood, not normal sizes like you would think, like a 2x4, or very large pieces of timber and things that would be the normal for building a house. It was taking him longer to build because he didn't have a lot of wood and they weren't long pieces. And she kind of thought to herself, we'll say that her name was Susan, and thought, that's interesting, but didn't really think too much into it. I guess I should have introduced the Undertaker's name, that we will call him William, or as people like to call him, Bill, most of the time. So Bill the Undertaker, very popular guy, keeps building onto his house, getting all these girlfriends, and like I said, he had Susan, who was finally starting to, as she was coming over, she was getting jealous of the other girls that he was still dating, because he wasn't just dating her, he was dating multiple women at this time. So in her anger, she finally decided to take it upon herself to confront him and asked him, so when you're building onto your house all the time, why are you using such small pieces of wood? Why in the world would you not go out and get, big pieces of wood so it wouldn't take you as long to build? Well, he kind of just brushed it off on her and just told her, well, I just like the smaller pieces because I'm so busy with my mortician job and with the grave digging and that, I have to focus on that. So I just like building the house little piece by little piece. And it's just easier for me to do it that way. And he goes, especially since my business is becoming so much more popular and I'm busy all the time, this is just the easiest way for me. At first, she's kind of like, okay, fine. But, she's jealous and she wants to keep picking at him and decided that she was just going to keep pushing the matter on him. And to the point where she's like, I think I'm going to start bringing it up to other people because she just thought it was so weird that he was building this house with such tiny little pieces of wood. Well, when he realizes that she's going to be doing that, he's not real too thrilled about other people knowing his business. Poor Susan has fallen down the stairs and has broken her neck. And it's a tragic accident that nobody questions anything, that she just tripped and fallen and unfortunately had broken her neck. Undertaker takes care of her again, her family, knowing that she was one of the girlfriends of Bill. So, of course, they have him take care of her for them, and he even does the whole entire funeral and that for the family for completely free because he felt so awful about her death and everything. Since she had tripped down his stairs, it was at his house that the accident had happened and that she had passed on. More and more people, because they just love this guy so much and he's just so friendly, people do start noticing that, he's building this house with small pieces of wood and this house just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But since everybody loves this guy so much that they don't question it. They don't look into it. They don't look into the death of his girlfriend either. They don't find that suspicious or weird in any way. Obviously, the town folks don't know the secrets of William. But what William was doing was that in the middle of the night, when no one was around, but at the same time, he'd be able to pull it off no matter what, because no one would question that the Undertaker is going to the cemetery, because William worked late all the time because he had such a booming business and was busy all the time. He was always out in the graveyard as much as he was at home building his house. So no one would question if William was out at the cemetery working late and if he was digging, because usually he was up at night digging the graves for the funerals for the following day. Well, unbeknownst to the town folks, while William was out digging the graves for the new graves, he was also out digging back up the old graves. And what he was doing, he was taking the coffins from all of the poor dead people from before, and he was just leaving the bodies in the ground, and he was taking the coffins back to the house. Well, he was taking these coffins apart in pieces, and he was reusing the wood, the very expensive wood of these usually expensive coffins that he was giving, remember, discount prices to people. And he was building his house with these tiny pieces of wood from the coffins. Now, mind you, the coffins back then looked very different than the ones that are around in today's world. So it was very easy for him to pry them apart and to, of course, use them to whatever means he wanted to. We have William, who has been building this elaborate 3-story mansion with the beautiful garden with the gazebo and everything. And he is building it out of old coffins. You can just imagine that if anybody found this out, it would be a huge problem and a huge issue. Who decided to take it upon themselves to make it an issue and a problem was all the disgruntled dead, especially his dead girlfriend that he had killed because he didn't want Susan questioning him anymore and didn't want her telling the wrong people, so that people would question him about the small pieces of wood, and if they would have found out that he was using these coffins of their dead family members and friends, he would be in jail or worse, probably put to death. So the accident that happened to poor Susan was not an accident at all. William had set it up to happen and for her to fall. And so this left Susan as a very, very angry undead. And the fact that he had come back to the cemetery to take her coffin from her got her to rise from the dead. And in all that anger and all that energy, all of the rest of the cemetery started to rise from their graves, and the energy, all that anger and energy that was just building up in there, and the resentment from all of them, especially most of these people were all people that were good friends with this man, and just the fact that he could use everyone and what he was doing. So you had bodies just rising up from the grave, and that they were coming, and they were going to come and get William. It is late one evening, and William is back home, and he is in one of the back rooms, and he's working away at prying apart one of the coffins that he has just retaken from, or I should say stolen from the gravesite, and is trying to take it apart piece by piece and putting the pieces of wood to the side because he was going to prepare to use them in the future. And all of a sudden he starts hearing strange sounds, just rustling in the trees, because he's noticed that as he's working in back that this weird breeze has just picked up, and this weird wind is going through, and he's just getting this weird chill, and he's just all of a sudden just getting kind of cold. He's just all of a sudden feeling this draft. So he goes and he puts on a coat, and he's just gonna keep working away at prying this coffin apart and taking the pieces. Well, then he hears just these weird noises, and he's just kind of listening. And it just kind of sounds like rustling noises, where it sounds like trees and branches, and he can hear twigs and things snapping. So he goes to the window, and he goes to look out. Well, he can't see anything. It's too dark outside, but he keeps trying to look, and he's like, I swear I can hear something out there, but he's not sure what's going on. Well, then at the back door of the house, he can hear something on the porch, because he's got this long, elaborate wraparound porch made for his fancy mansion, and he swears he can hear something moving on the back of the porch by the back door. Well, then he can start hearing. He swears he can hear this weird scratching sound at the back door. And he keeps pausing to try and listen. And he's like, what is that scratching sound? What is that? So he goes out from his little station where he was taking apart the coffins, and he starts going around the house trying to make his way to where the back door is. And then he can really hear that scratching noise, and he could just hear it coming down on the door, just scraping the whole way down the door, and he just hears it plain as day. Well, as he's getting closer to the door, there's a little tiny window that is at the door. So he starts realizing that someone's standing at the door. So he starts going, who's there? Who's here? Who is that? And he doesn't hear a voice, just the person just keeps scratching at the door. He's like, it's really late for you to be here right now. He's like, it's like midnight right now. What do you want? Well, all of a sudden he just hears this just something, just trying to say something, but they're not saying anything. So he's like, are you hurt? Are you ill? What's wrong? So he goes to the door and he peers out the window. And he's like, who is that? Are you okay? Well, all of a sudden, person looks straight into the window at him, and it hits him, and he realizes that he's staring face to face with a dead Susan. And she's just got these pale, sunken in eyes, and her skin just is gray, and you know she's just the Walking Dead at that moment. And William lets out this blood-curdling shriek, just not a noise that you expect to come from a man, but he just screams and he falls backwards in all of his terror, realizing that Susan is outside and she's coming after him. As William screams and he falls backwards, all of a sudden Susan just starts banging wildly as she can on the back door, trying to get into it. William, of course, starts to try and get up, and he's just fighting with himself, because I mean he's a big man, he's not a small man, so he's having some trouble trying to get up and to scramble away. All of a sudden he realizes that there's more banging at the door, and he can hear banging on the walls of the house, and he hears banging on the window, and all of a sudden he realizes, as he's looking around at all the windows around the house that he can see, that there are many other people standing around, and he's slowly dawning on him that these are all the people that over time that he has buried up in the cemetery, and he's recognizing people left and right, and he's realizing these are all the people that, of course, he'd taken all their coffins back, and now they were all surrounding his house, and they were just banging on the house, trying to break in. One of them gets through the window, comes crashing through the glass. Well, he's finally to his feet, and he's just screaming at the top of his lungs as he's trying to run away. So he's trying to make his way to the staircase so that he can run upstairs. Well, zombies start scrambling in through that broken window, and other zombies are finally breaking into the doors. They're breaking through the other windows. Others are still just banging on the walls, and you can just hear their awful noises as they're groaning and grunting because they can't say anything, but they're just stumbling their way into the house. And of course they're making their way, trying to get to where William's at. He's screaming. He's made it to the staircase, and he just starts scrambling up them. How terrified he was, he ends up knocking his knee on one of the stairs, and he falls down, and he tries to catch himself. Well, the zombies are slowly making their way to the staircase behind him, and he looks down and he can see them just down there below him, and he just screams again and tries to get to his feet, and he starts going up the stairs. Well, the zombies, of course, are slowly going up the stairs, coming after him, doing their groans, their as they're following him up the stairs. And of course William's trying to make his way to his master bedroom so that he can lock himself into that room, and he's just running as fast as he can, and he's already out of breath. He's only halfway through, but he's made this house so huge, so ridiculously huge, that he's got to go all the way to the other end of the house to where he's got his master bedroom all set up, and he can hear all those zombies just kind of scrambling up those stairs, and they're just slowly making their way up there, and he's just trying to book it. He's trying to make it to his room, and he finally gets there, and he shuts the door. He's having some problems trying to lock it because he's got that skeleton key, and he's trying to get it in there, and of course he drops it once because he can't hang on to it. He's just fumbling, so he goes back down. Now all of a sudden he can hear those zombies. They're coming down the hallway, and they're coming towards him. So he gets that key, and he picks it up, and he jams it into that lock, and he twists it, and he finally hears the click of the lock, and he moves away, and he's like, I don't know what to do. I gotta hide. So he goes, and he thinks, he's like, no, I gotta find a way to get out of here. So he's like, if I trap myself in here, they're probably gonna break in and get me anyway. So he goes to the window and he looks out. Of course, he's got that wraparound porch going around. So he's kind of got a ledge from that wraparound porch with the roof of that where he can go and he can stand out. So he's like, okay. So he, of course, opens the window and he gets himself very carefully and he goes out onto the roof. Well, he can hear those zombies. They're finally at that master bedroom and they're just banging and banging and banging on that door trying to break it down. Of course, you just hear William just freaking out again and he's trying to slowly make his way around. Of course, William's a big guy. He's not tiny in any way, so him trying to be agile and trying to balance himself on this rooftop, he's not having a lot of luck. Well, he's trying to look around. Well, while he's looking around, he can kind of tell that there's still a lot of movement going on around his house. And he's thinking, oh crap, they are completely surrounding my house. But all the years of him taking advantage of all these people and going up to the cemetery and stealing all their coffins, now he had the entire cemetery that was completely just slowly gathering around his house, and he can still hear him banging at the door. And he's like, well, what am I gonna do? I can't go down, I can't go back in there. Well, finally he hears them crashing through his door from the bedroom, and they're already scrambling to come and find him, and they know that he's out on that rooftop. They can sense him. They know exactly where he's at, and he can see the zombies. They're gathering down below as well, down underneath and gathering. And so he starts freaking out. He's just going along. So he's gonna start following this wraparound porch, and he's gonna just scramble his way. He's got zombies now. They're coming out that window and they're gonna start following him. But of course, zombies aren't very agile too, so he's got some of them that are coming down the roof and following him, but unfortunately there's some of the zombies that are just kind of tripping over themselves and falling off the roof themselves, and they're crashing into the zombies down below. William's just kind of going as quick as he can, but he trips himself on some of the thatch that is on top of this handmade roof that he had made himself. And here comes these zombies as they're slowly coming on to him, getting up closer and closer to him. And William just lets out this blood-curdling scream because he tries to get up, but he realizes that his pants legs are actually trapped into one of these pieces. There was a nail sticking out of the rooftop, and his pants were stuck in it, so he's trying to tug as much as he can to get himself free, but it's already too late. And all of a sudden, just one zombie after the other just descends upon him, including Susan, his ex-girlfriend, everybody else that he had buried before him, and he just lets out this blood-curdling scream. People from miles away through the rest of the town can remember hearing this atrocious, terrible blood-curdling scream, and they said it just was the most horrendous, hideous, awful sound you could have ever heard in your entire life. So everyone started gathering around, trying to figure out where did that sound come from. So they finally make their way until they get to William's house and see that his entire house was broken into, smashed in, all the windows were broken, doors were smashed in, and all they found was nothing but a pile of blood all over the rooftop of the wraparound porch. So they wanted to look for William to see if they could find him. They didn't have anything that they could go by because all they had was that it looked like there was a blood trail that led off of the roof, and then it looked like his body had been drugged for a little bit of time, and you could follow the tracks for a little bit once it hit the meadows area where it was grass and green. It's just, the trail led to nowhere. Unfortunately, they couldn't follow it anymore. Well, of course, while trying to investigate and going through, one of the town folks all of a sudden realized about that back room, and he called the rest of the town to come, and he got the town mayor and of course the sheriff and the other deputies and showed them this room and the horrendous mystery of what had was William, and that he had been taking these coffins and he had been taking them apart, and he had been using this wood to build this elaborate mansion of his. Everybody just decided that William's death was by cause of a disgruntled family member. They couldn't prove who had done it with all these coffins and that, and they knew that all these family members that had been taken advantage of that were buried up there. So that all these poor families decided to get coffins for their families again, have them dug up so that they could rebury them, and so that they could finally rest at peace. Of course, the tale of Bill, or William, ends there. Nobody ever saw him again. Nobody cared to see him ever again. As nice as William was, he really wasn't a nice guy at all. And anyone who would take advantage of the dead, well, the lesson here is that don't mess with the dead, because you never know what could come back to haunt you. But thank you for joining me at the campfire again, and for enjoying another ghost story my father used to tell me. Let me know if you recognize this story, if you've heard it somewhere before. And I used to love it when my dad would tell this story, especially when we would have new friends over and he would tell the story. He would purposely have a piece of wood, this is a small piece of wood, where he would finish the story and he'd be like, here, can you hold on to this piece of wood for me here? And of course, it was just funny watching my friends being like, oh, I don't want to touch that, after hearing about a terrible, terrible man taking advantage of the dead and using their coffins. So, thank you for joining me on another Luxxy Charms, and once again, share with me your ghost stories, or share with me if you know this story and have heard it before. And you can find me, Charsie Luxxx, on my Twitter for Charsie Luxxx, which is LUXXX, or on my Instagram for Charsie87. You can also find me on my other YouTube channel that I do with my friend DC called Little Channel of Horrors. We haven't filmed anything new in a while, but our old episodes are up there, and you can see our movie reviews of some of our top favorite horror films of all time. But thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Stay spooky, loves, and don't forget to gather around the campfire with me for next time. Bye!